Everyone thinks they understand what's happening when their dog trots over with a squeaky toy stuffed in their mouth, tail wagging, eyes bright. You're sitting on the couch after a rough day. Maybe your voice was a little off when you walked through the door. Maybe you've been crying. Maybe you're just quietly staring at nothing, and suddenly there's a wet tennis ball being nudged against your hand. The instinct is to smile and say, "Oh, you want to play?" and reach for the toy. But here's the thing. Your dog almost certainly does not want to play. Not right now. Not in this moment. Watch what happens after you take the toy. Most of the time, they don't want it back. They don't initiate a game of fetch or tug. They just stand there, or they sit down next to you, or they put their head in your lap. The toy was never about the game. The toy was about you. This is one of those small daily moments between humans and dogs that gets misread constantly, and the misreading actually matters. Not because it causes harm. You taking the toy and tossing it isn't going to damage your relationship with your dog, but because when you understand what's actually happening, it changes how you see your animal entirely. It shifts your dog from being a creature that wants things from you to a creature that is, in its own deeply sincere and somewhat heartbreaking way, trying to give something to you. That refrain is significant. It's the difference between an owner and a companion, between a pet and a relationship. So what is actually happening when your dog brings you a toy during a moment of distress? The short answer is that it's a resource-offering behavior rooted in reciprocal caregiving instincts that have been shaped over thousands of years of coevolution between dogs and humans. But the short answer doesn't do justice to how layered this behavior is, or how much it reveals about the inner life of dogs and the unique bond they've formed with our species. To really understand it, you have to go back further than your living room. You have to go back to the social structures that dogs carry in their DNA. Dogs are descended from wolves, and while the domestic dog has diverged enormously from its wild ancestor in terms of behavior and cognition, certain deep social instincts remain intact. One of those instincts is the impulse to offer resources to members of the group during moments of vulnerability. In wolf packs, when a member is injured or unwell, other members of the pack will sometimes bring food, will stay close, will engage in what researchers describe as caregiving behaviors. This isn't purely altruistic in the philosophical sense. It serves the cohesion of the group, which ultimately serves everyone's survival. But it is genuinely social. It is one animal attending to the distress of another. Dogs have inherited this impulse, and through thousands of years of living with humans, they've adapted it specifically for us. What makes dogs extraordinary, and what sets them apart from virtually every other domesticated animal, is that they have developed a specific sensitivity to human emotional states. This isn't a romantic projection. It's documented in research. Dogs track human faces. They read microexpressions. They respond differently to happy voices versus sad voices, to relaxed body language versus tense body language. They are, in a very real neurological sense, tuned into us. A 2018 study published in the journal Learning and Behavior found that dogs would approach a crying stranger before approaching a humming one, and that they did so in a submissive, appeasement-oriented way, not in a curious or playful way. They weren't investigating the sound. They were responding to distress. This distinction matters enormously. Your dog isn't confused when you're upset. Your dog knows something is wrong. The question is just what your dog is going to do about it. Here is where the toy comes in, and here is where it gets genuinely moving if you let it. Dogs, unlike humans, cannot ask questions. They cannot sit with you and say, "Tell me what happened." They cannot make you tea or call your friend on your behalf or offer solutions. They are operating with a completely different toolkit, and they know it, not in a self-aware, conscious way, but in the functional sense that their behavior adapts to the limits of what they're able to do. When a dog senses that you are distressed and brings you an object, that object is almost always something the dog values. It's the good toy, the squeaky one they guard from other dogs, the ball they sleep next to. The offering of a valued object is not arbitrary. It's the most concrete form of giving that a dog has access to. It is, functionally and emotionally, the canine version of, "I don't know how to fix this, but here is the most valuable thing I have. I want you to have it." Animal behaviorists sometimes refer to this as allogiving, the act of giving resources to another member of the social group. It has been observed across multiple species, though it takes different forms. What's particular to dogs is the combination of factors at play. The object being offered is something the dog personally values. The timing is specifically linked to perceived human distress, and the follow-through behavior after offering is almost always affiliative rather than playful. The dog doesn't want to play tug. The dog wants to be close to you. The toy was an opening, a social gesture, a way of bridging the gap between what the dog senses is wrong and what the dog is actually capable of doing about it. There's also something worth understanding about why dogs use objects at all in these moments. Rather than simply coming to sit with you, which they also do, dogs use their mouths the way humans use their hands. The mouth is their primary instrument for interacting with the physical world, for carrying things, for expressing states. When a dog is excited, anxious, or emotionally activated, having something in the mouth provides a kind of regulation. It's the same reason dogs chew when they're stressed. The oral activity is self-soothing. But when the emotional activation is outward directed, when the dog is responding to someone else's distress rather than managing its own, that same mouth behavior becomes a social act. Carrying something to you is the most physically expressive thing a dog can do in that moment. It combines movement, purpose, and offering into a single gesture. Now, some dogs do this more than others, and that variation is worth examining because it's not random. Retrieving breeds, Labradors, Golden Retrievers, flat-coated retrievers do this with particular frequency and intensity. This makes sense when you consider that these breeds were specifically selected for their willingness to carry objects and deliver them to humans, for their mouth-oriented engagement with the world, and for their sensitivity to human cues. Generations of selective breeding have essentially amplified a natural behavior into a defining trait. But this doesn't mean the behavior in retrievers is any less genuine or any less emotionally meaningful. It means that the channel through which the emotion expresses itself has been widened. The instinct underneath is the same across breeds, it's just louder in some. What's also interesting is the role that individual attachment plays in this behavior. Dogs that have a particularly strong bond with one specific person will often target that behavior very specifically at that person. They're not bringing the toy to everyone in the room, they're bringing it to the person they are most attached to, the person whose emotional state they are most attuned to. This selectivity is telling. It suggests that the behavior isn't reflexive or generic, it's relational. The dog is responding to a particular person's distress because that person matters to the dog in a way that others don't. The toy isn't a social nicety, it's a declaration of attachment. There's a related behavior worth mentioning here, which is what happens when you come home after a long absence. Many dogs will grab a toy immediately upon your arrival and bring it to you at the door. This is often interpreted as the dog wanting to show you a toy or being too excited to contain the energy in its body, which is partly true. But watch this behavior over time, and you'll notice that it tends to be stronger after longer absences. More intense if you've been traveling, more elaborate if something in your routine has been disrupted. The dog is managing two things simultaneously: its own emotional overwhelm at your return, and the social impulse to offer you something. Having an object in the mouth when you arrive is partly self-regulatory. It prevents the dog from jumping and mouthing, channels the excitement, but the offering aspect is real. The dog is bringing you something because you came back, because you matter, because your arrival is an event worth marking with a gift. This brings us to something that researchers who study canine cognition have spent a lot of time on: the question of whether dogs have theory of mind, and more specifically, whether they understand that other beings have emotional states distinct from their own. The evidence is nuanced. Dogs are not operating at the level of human mentalizing. They're not consciously thinking, "My owner is sad and I should comfort them because they are experiencing sadness." But they are doing something functionally similar. They are reading your state, generating a response that is appropriate to that state, and directing their behavior toward changing that state. Whether you want to call that empathy, or proto-empathy, or emotional contagion, or something else, is partly a semantic debate. What's not debatable is that your dog is responding to how you feel, not just to what you do. The evolutionary story here is also worth sitting with. Dogs have been living with humans for somewhere between 15 and 40,000 years, depending on which study you find most credible. That is an enormous span of coevolution. During that time, dogs that were good at reading humans thrived. Dogs that could anticipate human emotional states, that could comfort humans and be comforted by them. that could participate in the social and emotional life of the group. Those dogs had advantages. They were fed, protected, included. The selection pressure was real, and it was sustained. What you're seeing when your dog brings you a toy is not a trick or a quirk. You're seeing the endpoint of thousands of years of a species learning at a genetic level how to care for yours. There is something that happens to a lot of people when they really absorb this, a kind of retroactive tenderness for all the times they casually tossed the toy back without registering what was being offered. It's worth being clear that this doesn't mean you've been doing anything wrong. Your dog isn't keeping score, and the relationship hasn't been harmed by all those misread moments. But knowing what you know now, you might find that your response changes. Instead of reaching for the toy and throwing it, you might take the toy gently, say something quiet and real, and let your dog stay close. You might notice that your dog seems to settle differently in those moments, calmer, more relaxed, as if the gesture has been received the way it was intended. Because that's the other half of this. Communication between species is always going to be incomplete. There will always be gaps, misreadings, moments where the signal gets lost between sender and receiver. But those gaps close when you pay attention. When you learn to read the timing, the context, the specific toy they've chosen, the way they hold their body after offering. When you bring that kind of attention to the small daily behaviors of your dog, you stop seeing a pet and you start seeing a creature with an interior life, with affections and loyalties and impulses toward care. Your dog cannot call you when you're having a hard day. Your dog cannot send you a message or bring you food or hold your hand. Your dog has none of those instruments available. What your dog has is presence and attention. And a battered tennis ball that they have been carrying around since Tuesday. And the specific knowledge felt rather than thought, but no less real for that when you are hurting, they should bring you the best thing they have. That is what is happening when your dog trots over during your worst moments with a toy in their mouth and hope in their eyes. They are not inviting you to play. They are telling you, in the only language available to them, that you are not alone.